My name is David Ellison. I was born April 7th, 1931. I was born in Los Angeles, and I'm 89. My parents came from Illinois, and my grandparents came from Sweden. And incidentally, my grandparents walked from Los Angeles to almost to Fresno, where they lived, in 1912. They had a horse and buggy, and the buggy was full of goods and so heavy that they didn't dare ride in the buggy, so they walked. And as I recall, it took them about 2 weeks, 100 miles. Both my parents lost their first spouses, so they both had children. So I have nothing but half brothers and sisters. My mom's name was Ruth Ellison. Prior to that, it was Ruth Asplund. Prior to that, it was Ruth Lindman. My dad's name is Arvid Ellison. My dad was a carpenter. He tried general contracting, and he was too generous. He gave away too much, and as a result, he lost money, didn't make any money. But he was an excellent carpenter. He was outstanding skilled, and unfortunately, I didn't pick up that skill. I've been a do-it-yourselfer, and I've done a lot of building of things, but I'm not a good carpenter. My mother, during her periods where she lost her first husband and so forth, and she had to work for a while. She worked for the phone company for a while, and of course she had kids at the time to take care of. She also played the organ in church and got a little money for that, and the kids were farmed out among all relatives. Not very, because my next older sibling, older than I, is 7 years. And the next one beyond that was 12 years. And so I really never had them as playmates. I was more like their baby. And I have one half brother left. He's 96. Seems to still be going strong. We talk almost every day. And we occasionally, just recently, we looked at each other on Zoom. I remember that it existed. I was not really under the impression that we were poor, although we were, because my brother keeps reminding me that one day my dad bought me an ice cream, and my brother apparently was there, and he said, "Don't I get one?" And my dad said, "That was my last nickel." And one other memory of the Depression days, we used to get milk delivered to the house. That was common in those days. And my dad had to tell the milkman to stop delivering because he couldn't afford to pay for the milk anymore. And the milkman said, "Well, you have a small child in the house. I'll keep delivering and you pay me when you can." And so as a result of that, my dad would go out to the dairy, not every weekend, but periodically, and do repairs for them. As a kid, I don't think I ever had any expectation of going anyplace out of Los Angeles. Our first big travel was in a 1931 Chevy. We drove to Chicago to see relatives and so forth. I was 10 years old. So that was the biggest trip. And prior to that, the only trips we made were to the San Joaquin Valley, where my grandparents lived. I was a very shy, timid kid, seemingly afraid of most everything. You see pictures of the little kid hiding behind his mother's apron, and that was kind of me. I was especially afraid of girls. They were strange creatures. And that lasted through my teen years, so as a result I did not date very much, just very little, and started dating late in high school. My high school was Dorsey High School in Los Angeles. I did not like to go to school. I hated school. I had an aptitude for working, but not for going to school. I was a lousy student, yet I did eventually graduate from college. I was drafted. I had no intention of going in. I did not volunteer. I was not a happy volunteer, not a happy draftee either. I didn't want to go. I enjoyed being at home with my friends, but I got drafted February of 1952, and I figured I was drafted in Los Angeles. I figured I'd wind up in Fort Ord, which is up in Northern California, and that I'd be able to come home all the time. But I got to Fort Ord and they said, well, we need you in Korea right now, so we're going to send you to Hawaii for some quick basic training and right on to Korea. Well, I got to Hawaii and I wound up in the hospital with pneumonia and any number of things, and so literally I missed the ship. And I wound up staying in Hawaii, which was wonderful. 2 years in Hawaii. And I couldn't have asked for anything more. I was at Schofield Barracks, was the name of the camp, which is near Wahiawa on the island of Oahu. I should have hated being there, but it was fantastic. I had a job as an administrative clerk. I happened to know how to type, and so they put me to work as a typist. And that's what I did for 2 years. You know, on the way home from to Los Angeles, I had a talk with myself saying, I've got to learn to associate with girls and do some more dating. And I figured, oh, I'm going to date a different girl every week. I got home and within a week I met this young lady. Her name was MARVELLE Harder. If you want the whole story, I didn't know, I couldn't figure out how to meet her. To really get to know her. And I discovered that she took a bus to and from church. And so one Sunday morning, I watched for her to go down the street towards the bus. And I went and got in my car and went down and offered her a ride. And from then on, that was it. And I found out later that it was all planned. Her girlfriend knew that I was shy and suggested that she walk down the street and see if I would come after her, which I did. So that was all planned, and apparently everybody else in church knew that because they were all watching the episode. And my mother was a woman of much prayer, and she met my future wife about 6 months before I came home. And she commented to her that, oh, my son is coming home soon. I'm sure he'd like to meet you. Well, it was all arranged. I was set up. After I was married, I learned about all of these events that had happened and the planning that had gone forward, and I have no regrets whatsoever. But in the course of dating, we decided that yes, we ought to get married, and so we got a ring, and on Easter Sunday in 1954, we announced our engagement. And then we were married in October 16th, 1954. It was a wonderful wedding in church, in the church that I grew up in. In those days, we didn't have dancing and a huge buffet or anything like that. It was just coffee and cookies and cake and so forth. So it was a nice reception. And then in the tradition, in that group of kids that I was with, was to, as soon as the bridal couple left the church, they would all follow in their cars, honking and so forth and so on. And so the trick was to get away from them. And so I had set up a friend that we would let them follow us for a while and then take them down this alleyway that you couldn't pass anybody. And we'd stop halfway down where there was another alley, and I had a friend waiting there, and we changed cars and took off, and the rest of them were blocked. We stayed at the Miramar Hotel in Los Angeles in Santa Monica. And then we went on to Mexico City and Acapulco. I started to work for the airlines in 1951. And so I had passes. And so we had an easy way to get to Mexico City. Wonderful honeymoon. And I had a wonderful marriage. Most everything, literally. I started as a what was called a cargo handler for American Airlines in Los Angeles. And I was doing that when I was drafted. When I went back, I got similar type job, and then was a series of promotions over the years, and I was with the airlines almost 35 years. Incidentally, I started in Los Angeles, went to San Francisco, then to San Diego, then Los Angeles, then San Diego, then Los Angeles. During my periods after being in San Diego, we didn't want to move again, so I commuted to Los Angeles by air. I flew up every morning, flew back every night. I retired in 1986. I went to work for another little airline after that, Sun World Airlines, based in Las Vegas. That lasted for about 18 months before they went broke and left. I got another job as the finance officer of a small firm that was a distributor of electronic test probes. And I left them when I was 65, so I was retired for good. We had 2 children. Our daughter was born 2 years after we were married. My daughter's name is DeVal, which is made up of my name and my wife's name. My wife's name was Marvelle, so we put the 2 together. And she hated the name until now, and now she likes her name. When it appeared that we were not going to have any more children of our own, we tried to adopt up in San Francisco. And we were rejected because we were too religious. And so when we got to San Diego, we tried again. We adopted our son when he was 13 months old. And our son is Ronald, or Ron. We picked a name from some friends who had twins, and actually we used both names, Ronald Douglas, which were the twins. He worked into our family quite well. But he had just this urge to move, and he would run away and he'd be gone overnight. And in those days, the police did not chase down kids. They figured, well, they'll come home eventually, and he did come home eventually. It was the most exciting time. But he's calmed down, and he's a fine man. I love him. Their marriages. My daughter and I, she in her gown and I in my tux and so forth, looking at each other before the marriage. It was a very precious moment. With Ron, well, he has been just a very loving son. Just wants to provide for me in every way possible. I don't know what more I can say about Ron. My first wife had a difficult time all her life, but she was a tough lady, and she was a beautiful gal who struggled through it. So she died when she was 60. I was single for 3 years, and then married Lois, who was my second wife, which happened in 1997. And we eventually moved here to Lantern Crest in 2015, and she was here only 4 months before she died. So since then, I have been single. I have my own physical problems, and I don't want to unload them on anybody else, and I know what it is to take care of be a caregiver for sick people. It's a tough job. Simply being alone with them, like dinner or on a trip or so forth, that was just a wonderful experience. One recollection is we were on a cruise in the Mediterranean. We got off the ship and went to Monte Carlo by car. And on the way back, we stopped at a place for lunch. And we were right on the cliff, looking over the Mediterranean. It is the most beautiful shot, beautiful memories of being together. You know, we had some good trips and stayed in some strange places and had lots of laughs. One place that the beds were so bad that we got got up early and left early, left the keys there and just took off. There's quite a difference between married twice. The first time was, I would say, is a true romantic marriage in all respects. When you're older, it becomes more one of companionships. It's romantic, yes, but it's more companionship because you need each other. Do puzzles and attend the various meetings that we did have here until the virus shut down almost everything. I am a participant in the Glee Club here. In fact, I led the Glee Club for about 2 years. I like to sing. I still like to sing. And I sang in church choirs most of my life. I don't know why I would want to leave here. This has been a great life. Living in San Diego is an ideal place to live, and the job I had was great. Quite a bit of traveling because of working for the airlines. And of the places we've been, there have been a lot of nice places. Paris is wonderful, but San Diego was hard to beat. Was a friend, and a compassionate friend, one that was approachable and helpful and that kind of thing, willing to listen. And that's a difficult thing to remember to do here, because a lot of us old folks love to talk, and it's hard to find people that will simply listen. So I try to listen. Well, other than the fact that I love them both dearly, and the fact that one's adopted and one's natural doesn't matter one bit. They are both my kids, and love them both. And I just constantly pray that they will conduct themselves in a good manner, and I think they do. We have all made mistakes in life, and we look back on them and say, oh, if only I'd done this differently, and so forth and so on. That's common, that's human. But they are wonderful individuals, and I love them both.